Conversation with P. Vaidyanathan Iyer, Managing Editor, The Indian Express. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please welcome V. Anantha Nageswaran.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome our guest, V. Anantha Nageswaran, on stage.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to see all of you. It's a full house. Thank you, Anant, for making time for this. It's always a pleasure to have a discussion on so many other issues, concerning India, the rest of the world. Uh, just as an aside, I was having a chat with former RBI governor, and when he told me about when Anant was just appointed the chief economic advisor, I wouldn't name the RBI governor, but then he told me why it is so important to have people like Anant in the discussion table amongst politicians, amongst bureaucrats, amongst the stakeholders like corporate chieftains, because he brings a voice of reason. Given his depth in academics, he has actually been a dean also of IFMR. He's straddled both the worlds. He's been in the corporate side. He's been the chief investment officer at Julius Baer. He's been with Credit Suisse. And then he's been in academics and now in the policy making behind the scenes. So you won't see Anant so much in the limelight, in the front, talking about anything and everything, but you will see him always in the background, explaining things to you, giving you the context and perspective in which policy making is done in the corridors of power.
Thank you, Vaidya. Thank you for putting me at ease and feeling a lot better about this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Anant, I'll just plunge head on into one of the most, burning issues. On U.S. tariffs. Did it, when President Trump's kind of tariff announcement came, did it take you by surprise? Was it like a black swan event in global economy? Or did you see it coming? Because, world over you were seeing, signs of protectionism and, China becoming such a big manufacturing hub, of having, taken that entire manufacturing space. So was this kind of huge tariffs coming, and was it directed, we thought it might be directed at China, but was it directed only at China, and it came as a surprise that it was for the whole world?
Oh, so I think, Vaidya, your question has multiple layers. I thought initially it was about whether the tariff on India came as a shock, but you're talking about the general picture. Yeah. So I think if you are talking about the general approach to tariff that the current US administration has adopted, that did not necessarily come as a surprise. Because you saw that the Biden administration also kept many of the trade restrictions that but the Trump first administration had put in place. They kept them intact, and they even increased it in some areas.
Yeah.
And if you look at the number of trade restrictions that countries impose on each other, until about 2016, if you talk about the previous 10 years, 06 to 16 or something like that, it was around 3,000 restrictions per year. I'm not talking about tariff, I'm talking about non-tariff restrictions. That number doubled from 2020 onwards. After the Trump administration left So 2020 to 24, the number of trade restrictions that countries were imposing on each other went to 6,000 plus. So it was happening, and in fact, if you go to the Maratha Institute of China Studies, which is in Germany, they show that 80% of the trade restrictions that European Union imposes is directed towards one country, China. So therefore, that this was initially meant to sort of address this huge production-consumption imbalance in both the countries, US and China, in different ways, of course. The signs are reversed. I think that was to be expected. That was expected.
Right. But so, how it has kind of panned out over a period of time, over the last 5-6 months, is also you suddenly see that, it was given the huge tariffs on China and, both sides kind of also, increasing it. It seemed to suggest that Trump's whole idea of getting a stranglehold over China would happen sooner or later. But then now, as we progress in the months, we have seen that, a deal with China looks more certain than a deal with India. So how do you look at this situation?
I don't know about that, whether the deal with China looks more imminent than a deal with India. I would either disagree or agree with you. It's difficult to say. But I think I would still guess that the overall focus remains on the trade imbalance with China. The only question is there could be a tactical retreat, given the fact that, just 2 days ago, I saw a very interesting piece by Richard McGregor, who used to be the FT bureau chief in China, now who's the Lowy Institute in Australia. He said for some of the countries like Japan and Australia, he was talking about those two countries in particular, he said the United States is historically indispensable, but China is economically irreplaceable. For those countries, he was talking about it. So I think for the US itself, the same situation may apply vis-a-vis China. They have brought themselves into a position that they are irreplaceable in several product areas. So you have to do a detour, if you may. Yeah, I think, so we don't know whether it is a detour in the overall journey towards addressing this imbalance, or it is something more than a detour or a completely different journey than the one he set out on April 2nd. That we don't know yet. I wouldn't necessarily conclude that it is in one particular direction. I still believe that the overall goal is to restore the production-consumption imbalance in both the countries to a slightly more sustainable level. That remains the overarching policy goal. That's my view.
Right. But say with the 25% extra that came on India,
Yeah.
I'm sure it took many by surprise,
Yes.
even in the government of India. Now that it has happened, 50% US tariffs.
Yeah.
So I want you to kind of take us through, if you were writing this economic survey for this year, how does it affect the economy, and more particularly jobs? Because it hurts the most labor-intensive sectors, gems and jewelry, textiles. So can you tell us what is happening right now?
Look, so obviously the first 25%, which itself was a surprise, but that could have been handled. And I think from what I gather, companies and enterprises in Tirupattur, whom I visited about 10, 12 days ago, they were prepared to handle the 25% because your competitors had 19%. In Southeast Asia and Bangladesh and so on. And therefore, these extra 6% could have been absorbed and distributed between different stakeholders in the system. This second 25 obviously makes life very difficult. Even though, in general, I have been saying that export growth would always be a challenge in the coming years, not because of trade restrictions alone, but because growth in the developed world was going to be always difficult. And that is the basis of everything. If there is no underlying demand, no matter how tariffs are low, you're not going to get export opportunities there. So export growth would have been difficult already, but this definitely has become a lot more challenging. But this year, you must understand that first 4 months up to August, exports have happened without the tariff. So your impact this year will be in the second half of the financial year. And estimates vary about the tariff exempt and tariff affected sectors. So 60%. So you can do your calculations and based on, but unfortunately you have to make multiple assumptions.
Correct.
About second round effects and third round effects on uncertainty, capital formation, and as you pointed out, employment. So I think there will be an impact on GDP growth in the second and the third quarter. But assuming that the situation continues, But the full impact will be felt next year if the situation continues. So the order of magnitude could be anywhere between 0.3 to 0.5% this year in terms of real GDP impact, because there was some front loading of exports in the first quarter, which is what also led to a good GDP number as well in the first quarter. So second and third quarter will be, fiscal second and third quarter will be critical, but I hope by then the second 25% would have been resolved. But if it continues into the next financial year and last, that will be a huge challenge, both in terms of employment and in terms of GDP growth. Difficult to give you precise numbers, and finding other markets will be possible but not easy. Yeah. Because if you notice, China also is having its own challenges with the US, with exports to the US, and exports to the US have come down. So they will be also competing for market share in third markets. And their ability to finance their buyers and giving long lead time for payments, product discount, price discounts, etc., is there. So in that sense, it does raise the dependence on domestic levers of growth that much more. So that is a formidable task on hand for us.
Let me take off from what you said just now about, that the extra 25% being resolved. What gives you that hope? What is it that India will have to do to ensure that that 25% is taken off? Or do you think that US will be generous to do that?
No, I think of late you are seeing signs that they kind of realize that this is probably not yielding the kind of results, or it's becoming more counterproductive, etc. There have been, let's put it this way, from more aggressive signals, we are getting to slightly more mixed signals in the last few days, if I may say so. And I don't think we are also seeing any sign that, in fact, as we were walking to this podium here, I saw some comments made by the Finnish president, which were on the right line, saying that we may be ending up achieving some counterproductive results in terms of how we deal with countries like India if we go on this path. So he has kind of sent a general message to his European counterparts and the United States. So I do feel that that if you ask me for concrete evidence beyond what I am seeing in the last few days in terms of mixed messaging, I don't have a concrete basis to give you an answer as to why I think the second 25% will not last long. But I do feel that it will be more short-lived than long-lived.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But you think that India may have to do something about it on its own? Do you think that, or?
So I think what we have been doing in terms of basically concentrating on what is good for us rather than responding to it, that is what the right thing to do, and that is what we are doing. So I don't think we need to do a lot more, because we have increased our purchases of fuel products from the United States, defense products, and if you look at the kind of foreign overseas direct investment that Indian businesses have made in the US over the last 20 years or so. So all the marginal things have been going in the right direction as far as India's engagement with the US is concerned. And again, if you put a value to the amount of data that US service companies are collecting from India, whether it is Meta or Google, etc., then the US is actually in a massive trade surplus with India. So I think if we continue to do what we are doing, I think there will be a certain recalibration happening from the other side, in my view, because the current approach is not going to be a long-term positive thing in terms of overall relations here.
So how does the government step in for relief? We have heard a lot about government negotiating. We heard that it was almost close to a deal, but then now it is not so. With 50% US tariffs, it hurts the industry, exporters. So what is the government thinking of in terms of support to the various sectors?
So the good thing is, shouldn't be using the word good thing. The important thing here is that we do have a precedent in how we dealt with the COVID pandemic impact. So that, if you recall, at that time, the relief measures were targeted, were short duration and specific to the affected sectors. And in the last 5 years, with the advance of digital public infrastructure, etc., we do have data. We can get down to the enterprise level that will be affected by the US tariff. So you can design an intervention program that gives them more time in terms of working capital, in terms of cash flows, by, through financial payments, forbearance, giving them the space, and also emergency credit relief, similar to what we did in the case of the pandemic, etc. I think those will be the approaches that we need to take. And at the same time, companies also have to decide. This is where you have to now start thinking in terms of just recovering the marginal cost of production, so that you can keep up with the production mechanism, don't have to lay off people.
Yeah.
You can't recover full cost, obviously, but as long as you are earning a positive contribution, your variable costs are covered, then the government support should enable you to tide over this phase. And if, as I believe, this is going to be a short-lived phenomena, then I think we should be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Anand, something which struck me as we were, earlier discussions, over the last decade or so, we have seen that US has emerged over the last 10 years as a very strong, reliable partner. And then China, given what has happened, with China, it became a very strong adversary. But with either of these big powers, India doesn't have huge leverage. There is nothing that India really offers which could be a choke point for either of the economies, where you find yourself in a position that you're trying to grapple how to deal with both the countries. So I would like you to throw your wisdom in this situation. How do you look at this?
So if you sort of take one particular strand of thinking, what you say is true, that do we have any obvious leverage, sort of the indispensability to other countries? You may think the answer is no, but we do have. That's why I pointed out the amount of monetization of Indian data that other countries, the United States service companies are earning, is a huge leverage. Okay, and also in terms of the prospective growth rates, if you look at any country post-COVID, I don't think any country has gotten the kind of growth rates that India has been able to achieve in the last 4 years and continues to do so. So I think in terms of the prospective market size, the economy size, given the demographic slowdown that's happening elsewhere, apart from our current leverage in terms of the market size and the data that we are allowing, I think if you take the discounted present value of the importance of India as a market, that is an important leverage that we do have. And that is something that countries have to recognize, other countries that are trading with us. I don't think, if you look at India's per capita income, you might say, or for that matter, we don't have a global company like a TSMC or an ASML, etc. with us, which the world will have to see that they are functioning all the time. Otherwise, you are going to come to a standstill. That may not be the case. But there are different levels of leverage.
Yeah.
I think we do have some.
Correct. When you talk about demographic dividend, I was just struck by, what was happening here in Mumbai. Over the last 2-3 days, this large number of Maratha community actually protesting. Thousands of people on the roads in Bombay. And for what? For actually reservations. Reservations in government jobs, reservations in educational institutions. So in today's where we are trying to tackle the AI challenge, you have a large community where jobs are a big issue, where education in government institutions is a big issue. So how do you look at this problem? I'm just taking you outside of the US tariff things, but this a dominant community which actually seeks reservations, so lack of opportunities, lack of jobs.
No, I think, first of all, I think we shouldn't extrapolate from one incident that you have witnessed over the last few days here and say that our youth are only interested in the security of a government job and are not taking chances, because for each one of these kinds of examples you give, I can also give you, for example, the situation in Odisha, where in the last 7 years, the state has emerged as a world-class skilling laboratory for the whole country.
In Odisha, right.
In Odisha. And the amount of skilled students and youngsters there in that state now commanding a wage premium across India is also a reality. Okay? And also yesterday was the 70th anniversary of the National Small Industries Corporation. And they have a huge facility in Okla, which I visited 2 months ago. And they train youngsters from extremely labor-intensive occupations to extremely advanced, including EV servicing and pneumatically controlled machines. How do you service them? So it is not just a question of becoming employees. There is also an equally good number of people looking at becoming nano, micro entrepreneurs. And if you can create equal number of them, with each one employing just even 5 people, then you are looking at the picture from a completely different lens. So I think this is just one aspect what you're seeing. There are equally other compelling realities which are much more positive and reassuring as well.
Yeah. You know, after having dealt with America, let me come to China. One of the things which you actually talked about, a year back about, how we need to engage with China. Now suddenly you find that there are many people who are going, very, very enthusiastic about, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Tianjin, and then, his bilateral talks with President Xi. So as far as China is concerned, where India has a border issue with China for very long, it has security issues about Chinese investments in India. And then, of course, you have a separate, the indispensability of China, so to say, in terms of, what it offers, rare earth magnets, if they are not available, then, it impacts all our car players suddenly. Is there a way how you can deal with border issues strategically? You can deal with border issues separately and also pursue trade, business, and economic relations with China. Is that something which there is something to learn from, say, an Indonesia, Taiwan, which deal with China in similar spaces?
No, I mean, look, they don't have the kind of border issue that we have with them, so they're not exactly valid comparisons. But it is true that in general, we have to have multiple conversations with the same country in different dimensions, and all of them have to happen simultaneously. In fact, we have been doing that in the sense that post-COVID and post-Galwan, our imports from China have doubled. I mean, they went from 60 billion to 120 billion in 3 years, from 2021 to 23-24. So in that sense, we haven't allowed the border dispute to completely bring the trade to a standstill. So the important point is, which you brought up the economic survey from last year. The important point here is what is the kind of relationship in the economic space that will actually make us less vulnerable to supply disruptions. So that is the angle from which the economic survey in July 2024 was coming at. So is this massive import dependence is a good thing, or should it be balanced with something where it is produced internally and you also get to gain the know-how over time and you can become resilient, etc. That involves not just Chinese investment, it also talks about investment of foreign enterprises located in China. And you are looking at it in the case of Apple's iPhones, but that's only a finished product. We're talking about capital goods, because bulk of our imports from China is capital goods,
right,
and intermediate goods. So those are the areas where we can see, even if you don't talk about Chinese enterprises, you can also try and do more to attract foreign enterprises located in China to produce from India, not just finished goods, but even intermediate goods and capital goods, etc. So that is the approach to take, apart from long-term things like us investing in R&D, because again, we think that is very abstract. But if you look at how Indian pharma sector reacted to the TRIPS agreement in 1995, that came as a shock. right? I mean, intellectual property rights and royalties and the patent protection given to Western multinationals, etc. If you go back and do a case study of how Indian pharma companies reacted to the 1995 TRIPS agreement, there is a lot of lesson today for us in terms of investment in R&D, etc. And that is the line, that is the direction to travel.
So you would say that, the trade deficit can also be addressed by attracting Chinese investments in certain areas.
Or investments for which you are now importing from China. It could be investments by Chinese companies, or it could be by foreign companies operating in China and exporting to India.
Correct.
So it has both elements there.
Right. Coming to one of the things which, we got a very good surprise on growth numbers, first quarter 7.8%. One of the things which you said just now was about, how front loading of exports probably helped it. What were the other things, and can this growth be sustained? Does it look feasible that we are over 7% in the current year?
So first of all, yeah, there is some front loading that contributed, but equally importantly, I do think that there are some good positive transformation that is happening that we are still yet to incorporate into our own thinking and mental models about the economy. Because this 7.8%, or in nominal terms 8.8%, came largely because of manufacturing sector doing well, which could be due to some front loading. But equally, I think the consumption numbers, the investment numbers also, 30% growth, over 30% as a share of GDP, capital formation, that's a good number as well. And we know about the significance of rural demand and private consumption. And urban demand, that is where I'm coming to. The general perception by looking at listed entities is that urban consumption sort of is trailing behind rural consumption, which isn't true. If you look at the NPCI has started releasing the data on various digital transactions we are doing and multiple services sectors. You look at the last 1 year, hospitality sectors, hotels and restaurants, various categories of services, the growth is not less than 20% in majority of the categories. You have the data in NPCI website, you can check it out. So I think, and those are, since you are able to do even 2 rupee transactions, you are seeing a lot of business going to so-called unlisted entities, not just companies, proprietorships, partnerships. So there is growth happening, which is we are yet to adjust our mental models of where GDP generated, because we do have to account for some of these transformational changes that have happened.
Right.
So even if as we discussed earlier, export growth is going to take a hit in the second and the third quarter, etc. I do believe, that's why I said in my press conference post GDP data release, as of now, I'm not revising down my overall GDP forecast of 6.3 to 6.8% for now. I'll stick to that. So whether we continue to reach 7%, etc., given the uncertainties we face, because I do have to keep in mind that there could be second round effects on capital formation, etc. So I'm not in a hurry to revise my growth numbers upwards either, but I'm in no hurry to revise the numbers downward either.
Right, one of the things which the government did in the budget was also about, this making it easier, like, increasing the income tax exemption limit to 12 lakhs. That was quite substantive. So it has been almost like 5 months now. Are you really seeing, because at that point of time, it was talked about that it would help consumption, revive consumption.
Yeah.
Are you seeing some signs of that now?
So it is happening in the, we do track real-time data. And of course, you might say that two-wheeler, three-wheeler sales are generally on the sluggish side, etc. But if you look at the items of daily consumption, including some discretionary spend, it's actually pretty healthy. And it's good that you pointed out, because that is showing up in the fact that people's advance tax payments are much lower this year. Mm-hmm. Because of the income tax reduction offered in the budget. And what is going to come in the GST meeting will also add to the disposable income, and the fact that you have overall inflation rate tracking very low is also putting more purchasing power in the hands of people. And we are seeing it, if not necessarily in durable goods purchases, like two-wheelers or cars, etc. We are seeing it in consumption of regular items, non-durable goods, not just essential items, but even discretionary consumption. That has been holding up very, very well. And it is not just a rural India story.
So this GST rate rationalization, you think that would also help increase consumption?
Yeah.
That would also help the growth?
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly. The question is whether it will be of a magnitude that will compensate for the export loss is a different matter of calculations, but it will definitely offset and compensate for it.
The states have been saying that, they are going to face huge revenue loss, and the estimates range from, 50,000 crore rupees to almost 2 lakh crore rupees. How do you address that if, they want, compensation for that kind of revenue growth? Do you think?
No, first of all, just 3-4 days ago, we had a very good piece by the former RBI Governor Rangarajan talking about how states have done very well with the new GST regime. So some of their fears have turned out to be misplaced. And we should also remember that in 2021, if we were in the old system, states would not have had any protection whatsoever with the GST collapse that happened. Had they been in the old system when they were collecting their own sales tax revenues, there would have been no backup for them, whereas the 14% guaranteed GST growth gave them the cushion. So I think it is premature to say the states would lose out because they haven't lost out so far, and we are also not accounting for the possibility that the rate reduction can also spur more economic transactions. Which will compensate for the price. It's like price versus volume kind of framework.
Yeah.
So I think it will be premature to conclude or say that there's a huge risk of revenue loss for states.
Okay, so you don't think it might be?
I don't think it will be significant enough to cause a huge dent. In fact, there are multiple areas in which states can actually also do more on realizing their own tax revenues, etc.
Correct. So one thing, which you have pointed out several occasions is about, how the credit expansion, during 2008, that period, we had a good growth from 98 to 2002, some good reforms. Then 2003 to 2008, we had stupendous growth of 8% plus. Then credit expansion and what it led to in terms of bank structural imbalances, and then a long period of consolidation of huge NPAs, etc., resolution of those NPAs, and now the banks seem to be leaner and meaner and kind of in good shape. So are the corporate balance sheets. Why is investment still not happening? What is your sense?
You mean the corporate sector investment?
Investments,
no,
yeah.
I don't think it's true that it is not happening. In fact, if you look at the 24-25 financial year bottom-up data, capital formation by the non-financial private sector actually grew at very healthy rates. And you will see the data reflected in the national income accounts in February 2026. But if you look at the bottom-up data, 24-25 saw a pretty healthy rebound in the private sector investments.
Okay.
Actually. And frankly, we achieved this 36-37% of GDP in terms of capital formation or investment rate in the 2006, 7, 7, 8 period. But if you look at the kind of global situation and our own capital efficiency, which is better than other countries, in the current juncture, overall capital formation rate of between 31 and 33% is actually the ideal number. In fact, it is more sustainable in the long run than trying to achieve 35 to 40% of GDP numbers which Southeast Asia did or Northeast Asia did. But that's a different context, a different world it was. So I think in the current context, this is more sustainable pace. Yes, 25, 26, we have to wait and see what kind of impact it has, but it has not been a story of private sector holding back in a big way. There were, so 21, 22 was a big rebound year. 22, 23 was, it held up. 23, 24 was a disappointment in terms of capital formation in the private sector. But last year, it did compensate for it. And I think this year will be a little bit of a setback compared to last year's growth. But it is not an even story of disappointment. That's what I would point out.
This given given the uncertainties today, because of tariffs, you think that there is a hesitancy on the part of the private sector?
But
that probably would be.
Yes, if it turns out to be a long-lived phenomenon, in contrast to what I expect, it may be the case. But then, as we discussed earlier, you are seeing some huge compensations coming in the form of domestic demand, stepping up with the direct tax cuts and prospective indirect tax concessions, etc. And at the end of the day, we are a country which is not overly dependent on external trade.
Yeah.
And therefore, I don't think it should be a huge setback. There will be an incremental setback at the margin for private sector capital formation. But anything that was directed towards exports, but then equally, if you're able to, given the free trade agreements we have struck with the UAE, UK, Australia, etc., we might be able to discover other markets also. So I think it is somewhat premature to conclude that it would be a story of disappointment.
So, one thing which, given that, India hopes to or aspires to be a developed economy by 2047, and the current growth rates of 6.5%, 7%, do you think that is good enough? Do you think that, we can do much better than that? And if at all, then what do you do for that?
So, Vaidya, what constitutes a developed economy is sort of both economic and philosophical. So, I mean, if you are going to get to 30 trillion with a massively polluted water and a polluted air, etc., I don't think that's the kind of growth that you want. So, if we are able to sustain a growth rate, I mean, for example, the IMF is only assuming in its forecast for India for the next 5 years, at least that was the number in April, they assumed only 6.5% real growth, 10 to 11% nominal growth in the next 5 years, and in dollar terms about 9%. And we were looking at a figure of $7 trillion economy by 2030-31, based on their projections. I think that's, in the current context, it's a good number. Yeah. It's a pretty good number to be in. So whether we achieve a numerical figure of 25, 30, 35 trillion dollars isn't the way to measure. It's the question of how sustainable that number is, and whether people have a life that is comfortable, because these are all numbers determined by some calculation. 4,000 to 11,000 you are upper middle income economy, and then 11,000 and above you are a developed economy, etc. But it has also come with a huge accumulation of debt in many countries, and it is not sustainable. So I think it's sort of the stronger for longer is a better way to look at it, rather than looking at an absolute number as a target and then saying whether we will get there or not. I think that is not the right way to look at it.
Right. So one of the things also, Anant, you have pointed out, I think even in forums within the corporate sector, is about this, wage growth in the private sector, where profits have grown over a 5-year period, almost, 4 times, whereas, wages haven't really grown. Over the last 1 year, do you see any change? How has the corporate sector addressed this? Has it tried to address this? Or do they even see that there is reason to address this?
I don't think I see it in the data yet. I don't think I see it in the data. If anything, I would say the return to capital and return to labor is an issue to be addressed in this country, and I don't think the answer to address it is through fiat or government diktat or whatever, because ultimately it is sort of taking a different horizon, a longer horizon. In a longer horizon, I think a fair share of contribution or compensation to labor has to be an important part of even growing your own business. And especially in one of your earlier questions, you asked about the advent of AI and what it will do to job creation, etc. So I think it is difficult to give a mechanistic or a formulaic answer to that question. You can do this, you should do that, and it will solve the problem. But I think it requires a different mindset. Some of the things that Western economies sort of lean towards in the last 20, 30 years, where in the name of shareholder capitalism, the emphasis on short-term results, quarterly numbers, etc. I think some of those kinds of financialization of your capitalist model, I think we probably should not be absorbing them at this stage of development in our country.
But in your interactions with corporate sector, have you seen kind of, their are they open to are they aware of this? Do they think that this is a genuine structural problem?
No, I do. It is difficult to give you a sort of, it's difficult to paint with a broad brush and say either they get it or they don't get it. I think it's difficult to make that kind of a generalization here. Yes, many of them do appreciate the fact that, and some of them are practicing it as well in their own enterprises. So I think, but it is something that we need to sort of keep as a sort of a topic for discussion until we see that there is a sort of an approach which is much more sustainable for the economy and the society. Because without that, ultimately, even the business model themselves will become vulnerable.
Correct.
In the future.
And on affirmative action, do you see that there is kind of, of course, corporate sector is doing a lot of CSR, but do you see affirmative action actually being kind of, with such protests happening in several states, we have seen this protest about jobs. You see a bigger role for corporate sector in that?
So, it's a very well-worded question, Vaidya. So, I will look at it this way. Whether it is affirmative action with respect to workers or when corporate sector itself seeks protection from the government, that's also a different kind of affirmative action that they are seeking. So for any affirmative action, I think depending on the context, there will be a role, there will be a need for it. But the only thing is, how do you design it? So it's not a philosophical, I would say it's more of a design question than a philosophical question. Because at a philosophical level, for a country of this per capita income and this size, there will be needs for affirmative action from time to time to let the periphery converge to the center, etc. But the question is, how do you design it? Same thing applies to corporates and the government, and the same thing can apply between corporates and their employees. Whether there is a skin in the game for the beneficiaries. What is the quid pro quo obligation that they have to deliver? For example, in the corporate sector, when they look for government to support them vis-a-vis competition from elsewhere, it cannot be open-ended, it cannot be without counter guarantees, a performance in terms of export performance or productivity growth, etc. Similarly, with respect to between employers and prospective employees, etc., if there is affirmative action, there has to be a certain quid pro quo in terms of what you do in terms of continuous skilling, upgradation, maintaining your physical and mental health and employability, etc. There has to be a quid pro quo. Yeah. Because without productivity, there won't be much in the pie to distribute.
Right. One thing which also kind of, I thought I'll pick your mind on is on about, how in the 2003-2008 period also, the country also grew phenomenally well because exports did very well. I think there was global growth, which was actually fueling exports, Indian exports. But in this period, in the times that we are in, countries have turned more protectionist, and probably India also, in some of its tariff measures, it looks a little protectionist in certain sectors. So is it more for the Indian economy, the growth levers are more domestic than exports?
Yeah, so a short answer is yes, relatively speaking, but the long answer is it shouldn't be only one.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, our exports post-COVID, merchandise goods have gone from 290 billion to 440 billion, and services sector have grown even faster. We're looking at, therefore, last financial year, looking at $820 to $830 billion of overall exports. And that's not a small number. And if you look at together with imports, even if you exclude petroleum, we are at 35% of GDP, total trade to GDP ratio, excluding petroleum. That's a good number. Including petroleum, it goes to 40, in the 40s. So it has been a big contributor in many ways. So the answer is not either or. The question is, and protection is, as I said, I'm not against it as a philosophy, because if you look at the way developed countries grew, it was on the back of protection. They didn't get to today's developed country status without practicing protectionism on their own when they were growing. And their model of growth is built on capital intensity. We are a labor-abundant country, and we have imported a model of growth which is sort of antithetical to our labor endowment. So we have imported a capital-intensive growth model. So we do need time to catch up with that kind of product. So, but that's why I said protection per se is not a bad word, but in return for catching up in terms of performance and productivity, etc. So we would need that. And ultimately, you do need exports to benchmark yourself. You cannot go back to import substitution, and you cannot protect domestic industry and give them the space not to improve on quality, not to invest in R&D and benchmark themselves against global quality. That is not going to take us forward.
Right, because at the end of the day, consumers, like, a large part of India would want cheaper goods, cheaper services.
Yeah.
One thing related question which I thought I would address to you was about this: the Prime Minister has spoken about Aatma Nirbharta, self-reliance, and of late he's also spoken a lot about Swadeshi, use of Swadeshi. So what sense do you make of that? How do you kind of, at times it can be misinterpreted as something that, we are not open to globalization, we are not open to the rest of the world. So how do you look at this?
None of this is inconsistent with export orientation. If anything, I think there is, it's a question of relative emphasis. Considering how the world itself became highly protectionist in terms of ensuring supply chain resilience rather than supply chain efficiencies. I mean, you remember COVID time, even within European Union, there were restrictions on export of personal protection equipment within the EMU bloc or the broader EU itself. So it is in that context what he's saying, that you shouldn't be held to ransom by somebody else and you have to develop the domestic capability. But how do you do that is not necessarily only through protection. You should do it by sort of making yourself indispensable. And that requires scale. And and of course you can say, given India's size, you can be a seller only in India and still have scale. But then the quality that the Indian consumers desire will not come without being exposed to competition. So what he is saying is, from the point of view of ensuring that you are not held to ransom by some other supplier, at the same time that doesn't rule out, or in fact, it will be enhanced or accelerated only if you're exposed to external benchmarking.
Right. On that, on that issue, let me push you on this, that, in the corporate sector, we have seen, or we have heard, or from within the government, we have heard that these quality control orders are something which, big companies are able to push through with the government at the cost of the medium and small enterprises, which have made their own representations to the government, and they've said that in as many words. So this is how it gets misinterpreted within the policy circles also, like, Swadeshi, self-reliance, pushing for protectionism by certain big corporates. How do you see this? Because you are at the end from where, you can kind of figure this out.
No, it's, again, fair question. The answer is, if you are competing with countries which practice both overt and covert protectionism, you do need to have all options on the table of competing with them. Again, philosophically or in principle, I will not rule out the use of quality control orders, okay? But the question is, always look at it in terms of what is the unintended consequence it is causing.
Correct, yeah.
And what is the net cost and benefit. So you can look at it, are you doing it more for finished goods? Are you doing it for intermediate goods or primary goods and even capital goods which hurt you in the process? And if the industries that are protected by the quality control order in terms of imports, are you doing it to industries that already enjoy a certain level of protection? And do you really check whether there is a domestic production available, or is it going to come into being in the foreseeable future? If that is not the case, then you don't need it. And lastly, can you also do it in a manner where it is easier to comply with these rather than making it more difficult in terms of inspection? So I don't think we should use it as a means to go back to a licensing or inspection and compliance Raj, but it as a policy tool at your disposal, you should keep it. It should be a part of your optionality.
Correct. I don't know whether I've told you about this in advance, but there's a set of questions which Anant has on, which give you binary or options where you can pick and choose. Anant.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Nageswaran. It's been such an incredible conversation and always a lot of fun talking to you. You've spoken about AI, you've spoken about all those. We haven't spoken much about technology, but we've spoken some. And one of the things is that we need to do something for the Instagram audience. So what we do is we try and do a rapid fire after. So we try and do a rapid fire after every Adda. And that's what Vaidyu is alluding to. But just while walking here, I passed by my friend Nilesh Shah, there he is. And he, before the rapid fire, I want to ask one question that he, a question to you that from some data that he brought to me, or rather he was mentioning and I was sitting in the audience about a week ago, which I was very surprised by. 38 lakh crores of cash is sort of in circulation in India, currency. Is there any way to utilize this for, capital creation? I mean, is this something you think about? Is this an opportunity we can do something with?
I'm not sure I would look at it in this way. I mean, as a percentage of your GDP is about 10% or slightly. So, I mean, it could be probably a normal, much of it goes into transactions and some of it is precautionary in nature. So I'm not sure that you can say this is something that is completely idle and waiting to be tapped into. So that's not the frame.
Okay. Leshi, have I got the data right? Yes? Okay. Okay, cool. 12% of GDP-ish. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So short answers, if possible. And I know I'm asking an economist for that, but have fun with it. Economics or ego? What's holding up the US FTA more?
Economics or ego?
Or ego.
It's economics.
Okay. Net, which country stands to benefit most from the 50% tariffs on India? Bangladesh, Vietnam, or Pakistan?
It depends on the product.
Net, overall?
Bangladesh, Pakistan, or?
Vietnam.
So, I would say it's Vietnam.
Vietnam, okay. Putin, Xi Jinping, and Trump, rank in order who has the most power to shape India's next 5 years?
I would, between the two of them.
Three of them. Putin, Xi Jinping, and Trump.
Who has the most power to shape? I would say Indians, Modi.
Modi. Okay, I'll rephrase. Great answer. And obviously, you've been doing this for a long time, so. Putin, Xi Jinping, or Trump, which of these three can be the biggest impediment to Viksit Bharat?
None of them. There's a fourth option, none of the above.
Okay. Okay. The one most pronounced economic impact of Operation Sindoor?
Defense capabilities and defense exports.
Okay. One hope and one fear you have as an outcome of the GST Council meetings happening today and tomorrow?
One hope.
One hope, one fear.
Hope is, it's a huge compensation for growth. And one fear, it depends on people's expectations. So if it falls short of the expectations. So the fear is that we don't do enough on the process improvement. Okay. Hope is that the rate reduction is a compensation for export uncertainties, but the fear is that we don't do enough on the process side.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Short game. You're the chief economic advisor to the government of India, but we're asking you to play the role of a economic advisor to specific industries. Short advice you'll give to a specific industry. Diamond industry.
Diversify into other markets.
Outside of US?
Outside of the US.
Okay. Textile industry?
Cover marginal cost and keep the show going.
Pharma industry?
You're not affected. They're not affected.
So, status quo, or should they brace for impact in case there's something goes south in November? Or
why November?
I think Mr. Goyal yesterday said that in November there are going to be more talks.
Yeah.
And so.
No, I think we should. Pharma is more of an investment in R&D. Yeah.
Okay. IT and services, IT services?
Product innovation.
So that's not only tariff related, you're saying AI impact, all of that?
Yes. Yes, I was not looking purely at tariff.
Yes.
You said advisor to industries, not
correct.
tariff.
Correct. Yeah. I agree. Education.
Open up.
Elaborate, what does that mean?
I mean, I'm talking more from the government side.
Right.
But between states and union government, we need to open up higher education
Okay.
for
Okay.
more competition. But for the education institutions, if you mean what
Yeah, what
advice I would give to education institutions, I think it's about making sure that your student, your customers, the students, consumers are not just educated, but also physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy.
Okay. Yeah. No, fair. Is there one industry or one organization in India that you think has been smart to view the Russia-Ukraine situation opportunistically?
I have to think a lot about it.
We have some time.
No, I think it is not as if India has not been importing crude and refining them and selling them before. So I don't think there is any opportunism here, just a continuation of prior business practice.
Okay. Okay. How many years before the USD loses its status as a reserve currency?
It will be a very long time. Not in my lifetime.
My life, I'll be 40 soon. So
You're in the 40s?
I'll be 40 soon. I'll be 40 next year.
So that gives you a 20-year, sort of a...
I hope I'll make it till 80 at least. So I think 40.
No, compared to me, I'm saying. I'm 62, so
Okay.
you're 40. So no, I don't think so. I think the TINA factor is a huge advantage for the US.
Yeah. We had Larry Summers here a couple of years ago. I was having a conversation with him. He made I always find it very funny. He says, TINA factor. Japan is a nursing home, China's a jail, Europe's a museum. So there's no option really. Except for obviously crypto, which Trump is championing. So
No.
crypto will never be an alternative.
No.
Okay. Even with the president's family invested in pushing it.
No, it's no. I don't think so.
Okay. In your opinion, the gaming ban, 20,000 crores of exchequer revenue lost. Firstly, is that a correct number or not? I don't know whether you would know that. Obviously, more of a political move than an economics decision. But do you think it was a wise one?
Fair disclosure. I wrote an article in Mint praising the move.
Okay.
So that answers your question.
Okay. So, but in that article, because you didn't write it in Express, I didn't read it. But
I wrote an article in the Express about the emotional and mental health of Indian youth that is important. You can make the connection.
Yes, no, fair. But do you believe that these activities will stop because of the ban, or what percentage do you think will go offshore?
I don't buy this theoretically elegant argument that it goes underground. But see, majority of the people, if it is legal, they will pursue an activity, and majority of the people, if it is illegal, they will not pursue it. There will be some diehard addicts or whatever who will find multiple ways of, but we are looking at numbers, proportions here.
Yeah.
So yes, there will be some people who will do that, but a policy cannot address everybody. But by and large, what has been done is a public good.
Okay. You were telling Vaidi that you think that Hanuman is finally flying, and the private sector is investing more. So give us 2 data points that by which you think that the private sector is.
I did give Vaidya an important data point, which is in 24-25 the capital formation of the 4,000 odd non-financial companies sample that we have looked at, that actually was as high as the government's capital expenditure. The 10.5 trillion rupees. Okay. So I saw a number that was close to 10.2 trillion rupees, and which was not the case in the previous years. That's your number.
Okay. All right. Why do rich Indians leave India? Is it to save taxes? Is it fear of being iced, or is it quality of life?
So I am neither rich nor have I left India. So you're asking the wrong person this question.
But I'm sure you guys have thought about this in some way. I mean, we see so many people talking about Dubai, Singapore.
Yeah. I mean, look, in a large country of 1,480 people, there will always be some people leaving and some people coming back. And I don't think, it's something that I would want to take it so seriously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beyond Trump, between China and US, who is a better long-term ally?
Better?
Long-term ally.
India, actually, given its size and geography, is its own best ally.
for an exporter, if you talk to an exporter today who's exporting a lot to America, whatever happens to 50%, we're all quite confident.
From an exporting perspective, yes, it is the United States.
We are all quite confident it'll come down to 25. That's what we're all kind of hearing and get. But do you think that they should continue business as usual, obviously optimizing on margins, et cetera, but sticking, or can they be as reliant on America as they have been, or do you think after this, they need to think beyond?
Look, thinking beyond is always a good idea, regardless of the situation. You should have as diversified a market as possible.
Right.
I mean, your portfolio of buyers as possible.
Yeah.
But I think the United States will continue to remain an important market.
Okay. The one dependency towards China that scares you?
Renewable energy transition dependence, for the components that go into renewable energy transition.
In 2047, which country do you see will be the largest country in the world? For
In terms of what?
GDP perspective.
2047. I can't do the math so quickly in my mind, you know.
At some point, do you see China being the largest country in the world?
Not necessarily, because they are getting into a demographic decline and so on. I think it will be the United States and India.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And my last question, what is the one lesson, is there one lesson from the pandemic that you have learned which you are using to tackle Trump's tariffs?
It is to provide targeted and time-bound relief, not omnibus relief.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for playing. You've been a very good sport, and obviously you have experience in dodging questions also, so I'll take both of them. We have an incredible audience here, so maybe get some questions from the audience. Can we get a show of hands who all have questions there? Yeah? Yeah, I can get the first one here. Jitu, please don't be shy.
Hi.
Nileshji, I'm going to come to you also, please. Yeah, yes, of course, Jamal. Yes, go ahead.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hi, Anand. I have one suggestion and two questions. We just recently attended a conference organized by Motilal Oswal, and there was a very good presentation by the Vice Chairman of Tube Investment, Velayan Subaya, who on reforming manufacturing in India. And I'm not going to go into details, but the basic of this that he has borrowed the experiences from China and put together a clear roadmap of what can be, and it seems very doable for India as well. So could I request you to have a look at this presentation and be presented to, if possible, by the same gentleman, or at least have a look at this presentation, because it was quite eye-opening for me.
Sure. No, I'll be very happy to. No, it'll be very useful.
Yeah. I had two questions. One is that, are we somehow implicitly accepting that 25% is an acceptable rate of tariff for us, in a sense? We can live with 25%. So in which case, Trump's tactic of putting a stupid rate of tariff to make us accept 25%, or shouldn't we be leveraging our strength, our supposed relationships with the US, for having at least parity in terms of the rate that we should stick to? That was my first question.
No, that's a fair question, and I don't think we are saying that we should live with the 25%. It was just a question of milestone approach. Let's first get the penal tariff out of the way, and the conversation for the reciprocal tariff was ongoing, and I think that will also find its resolution. So the most immediate objective. So we are looking at it from the milestone basis, not as a fact that we should accept 25. And if it requires a certain opening up on our part, etc., and concluding an agreement, yes, we should be pursuing that.
The other thing which is becoming clear to us is that it's not just economics, but also peak on behalf of Trump and his cronies that is dictating the equation, right? So if we recognize that, and this 50% plus is not sustainable, I think the Americans also know this. So they have to climb down at some point of time because we are not budging. But they may need a face-saving, some device. So have you been thinking, and how do we make Trump not lose so much face and yet climb down?
No, it's a fair question. I think given the fact that both sides realize that there is a need for an off-ramp, I'm sure that very desire itself will, over time, the engagement will lead to I don't have an answer to you immediately what exactly is that, but the desire and the need for an off-ramp for both sides will lead to a discovery of one.
I'm going to put Mr. Munot on the spot at the back there at some point. So, Navneet, please. Yes, please, Jitu, go ahead. Right here. Manjeet, something geopolitical we need to also get out of you.
So between the two Anants, okay. Now, Anant, two questions. One, we're in exceptional times, okay? This 50% tariff and the collateral damage is real, okay? When you talk to people. Just if you were finance minister for a day, does it make sense to go out and say, go to parliament saying we're in exceptional times, I'm going to expand my fiscal deficit by 200 basis points, and rates are low, we can afford, the markets are going to fund it, and we're going to use this to bridge the gap. That's the job of the government, to come and bridge in exceptional times. Is that a fair ask, or you disagree with this?
I disagree with that.
Reason? I mean, rationale.
No, I don't think that's necessarily the only answer. And if anything, there will be collateral damage to that, and that will probably offset the effect of the fiscal deficit expansion you are saying. Because, for example, if again, since this hypothetical situation, if the 10-year borrowing cost of Government of India goes up by 100 basis points on account of that, that probably washes out the impact of what you said. So I have to take into account, if I were a finance minister, I have to take into account the net cost and benefits of what you are proposing at this point. So COVID was an open-ended global phenomena, and therefore, yes, expanding fiscal deficit when everybody else was doing was the right thing to do. And we did it in a very targeted, efficient manner compared to others, which is why we could bring it down from 9.2 to 4.4. And look at the benefit of having done that. Your 10-year borrowing cost was 9% 10 years ago, now it is 6.5%. That's a huge stimulus in and of itself. So I don't think we should look at it only from the fact that the situation needs money. I don't think situation needs support. It need not be a fiscal expansion of that magnitude. So it's all about what is that one approach that will be optimal. I don't think the fiscal deficit expansion alone is the optimal answer.
Okay. Second question, if I may go with it, right? The de-dollarization theme is gaining momentum. Okay. We can see
I don't see it in the numbers.
No. So just bear with me for a second.
Sure.
Right? Euro, sterling, Swiss franc, Sing dollar, all are telling you they're up 12, 13, 14, 15% with the dollar. And you're already seeing a shift in central bank portfolios, okay? My question is, you can argue it's cyclical, I can argue it's structural, and this debate can go on ad nauseum. But
right.
My question is the RBI holding too much US Treasury in that context?
No, that is something which you should probably ask the RBI. No, I think all central banks, including ours, do have a diversified portfolio of currencies in accordance with their overall weight in the global trading volume, in their global reserve currency, global reserves, etc. And RBI is no exception.
I think since you're talking Forex, we got Jamal in right now.
Well, before Forex, my question, first and foremost, thank you very much, was exactly his, which is that should we not expand the fiscal deficit, but critically invest it in the areas that you already mentioned we need, which is education, health, and jobs. I mean, I understand, see, we've been doing well. S&P is very happy with us. We've come down to 4.4. So rather than just a one-off, I think we should perhaps get into a 2-3 year program where the fiscal deficit is going to rise, but we're going to use the money where we should.
No, just a few points of order. The total fiscal deficit between states and the union government as of for this year, if we stick to the budget numbers, will still be around 7.5% of GDP. And we have just given a very significant direct tax relief, and there is a significant indirect tax relief that is coming. And a 1 lakh crore employment-linked incentive scheme has been announced. And 2 schemes for research and development, the Anusandhan National Research Fund and the Research and Development Innovation Fund with 1 lakh crores have been announced. So I don't think that the fiscal policy is tight, that it needs such a massive expansionism. And therefore, I would be very wary of causing collateral damage to the very economy that I seek to serve with the fiscal expansion.
Fair enough.
Mr. Munot at the back there, please. Yeah. Get the mic there. And then, yeah, let's get Manjeet here, please. Go ahead. You have a mic yet? Behind you. Yeah.
So we did PLI for manufacturing. Something similar should be done to attract talent to India. So let's say in US, the best talent, whether in Wall Street or in professors, scientists, in Silicon Valley, everywhere. So we had a campaign like an Incredible India to attract tourists. This should be like to attract talent in India and whatever it takes. And I'm just thinking, maybe a 3-year tax holiday for them. If they are really, so you put a list of 10,000 people you want to attract back to India, and then there is something done for that.
It's a fair point. I don't know if exactly what you are proposing is in the works, but I know that the Department of Higher Education is taking the underlying concept of your idea seriously, and something is in the works.
Lots of European countries have done this now, UK, Spain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the tax holiday part that he's talking about.
It's just easy entry, that's all.
It will be an important aspect, because if we are going to invite even Indian origin people,
back, yeah.
And if they stay here for more than 183 days, then they become tax residents, and then they have to pay tax on their worldwide income in India. So those kinds of things need to be addressed. But there is a huge, there is a good deal of thinking going on on this aspect. Yeah.
Manjeet, go ahead.
Hi.
So the hostility from the US is not unprecedented. We've seen this before in 1971. But really, what happens in the worst case scenario where the US decides to impose sanctions on us? The H1, there's already a grand bargain with China on the cards. The H1B visas start to get attacked, and then we get completely sanctioned as we did before. Are we prepared for this worst case scenario?
I'm going to carry this question with me to the people across the road from North Block and ask them to answer you.
Mr. Raghu also, is there a comment?
Sorry. You talked about the gross domestic capital formation, which is unprecedented, because at mid-30s, it's plus 30 is a good number. What you didn't mention is what is happening to the gross domestic savings, which has come down since 2011. And conventionally, we have been a high savings. If you remember the debate in the 70s of capital formation and savings, the Raj Committee report and stuff. What are the implications of that? So that makes growth even more difficult. Second, I can't think of a single economy in the world which has grown without an export push, which in an increasing world, again, is going to get, with a protectionist world, is going to get into trouble. So growth looks very difficult. You may be optimistic about it. What is it that one could do to transform the economy? Something like that happened in 91, or perhaps to a less, which was liberalization. 2017, you do formalization. Is it time to look at something of that order? What comes to my mind is deregulation. Is that something on the cards which will actually transform the economy, rather than looking at these numbers that are stacked heavily against us? Plus, last final point, why are we not talking about the fact that even corporates, the R&D and innovation expenditure is probably the lowest in the world? And despite the fact that the funds have been created, we have seen so many funds created, the utilization is very, very low. What can government do to incentivize corporates to spend more on R&D beyond tax relief?
So, sir, you had multiple questions in this. First of all, on the domestic savings rate, the fact that the current account deficit is around 1% is sort of the sign that your domestic savings investment balance is not bad. Because after all, the external deficit is nothing but the mirror image of the domestic savings investment balance. As far as the point you made about no country has sort of grown rapidly over time without export, I completely agree with you. And I also agree that the context has become much more challenging. Therefore, we need to do more, not less, in terms of efforts. On the R&D front, I think the sheer, whatever made the Indian pharma companies up their R&D spending to between 4 and 7% of their turnover in 1995 when TRIPS agreement happened, is the incentive. That it is in their own medium-term profitability interest. And I think whenever we have given accelerated tax deductions, etc., that hasn't necessarily, so it's a question of, I mean, to put it very respectfully, it's a question of horizons that they are optimizing over. Yes, and So you must be very familiar with the fact that there is two group of ministers that have been constituted on deregulation. There is a high-level committee that has been formed, and there is a task force under the cabinet secretary which we are working on, and I think Indian Express covered it, on state-level deregulation also. I would very much agree with you. That is the one secret sauce that we have to juice up growth, which is to not just about ease of doing business. It is about ease of being honest.
So, between labor reform, land reform, and judicial reform, which of these three do you think has the most multiplying impact, or any other that comes through?
So, I mean, judicial reform, I'll defer to the judiciary to think about it. I think between land and labor, I would think the land reforms is more important, between the two. I mean, both are important if you don't give me a choice, but if you are making me choose between the two, I would think land reforms.
When you talk about foreign
it's a fixed cost of doing business, so yeah.
Right, but when you talk about foreign investors, what do you think puts, makes them sort of get most
afraid? From the
afraid?
foreign investor perspective, it is about tax certainty and tax processes. That's the key.
Which hasn't been,
no, it's,
why do you,
there are multiple,
like a couple of landmark, bad examples of that. But
those are thankfully behind us, but it's really more about things like the advanced pricing agreements, the safe harbor limits, etc., and the certainty and the day-to-day interactions and the processes and interpretations which are consistent. Right. These are all the areas that really kind of can push them away.
I always hear people saying, how slow our judiciary is one thing that concerns them.
Yeah.
They talk about corruption also is still institutionalized in many parts of India. That concerns them. They talk about corporate governance overall, enforcing and corporate governance, and obviously land and labor sort of as being tough to access. I've given you 5 options. Do you hear other things? Are these things also equally important, do you think? Or
in general, I would say the most important thing is the time for everything. I mean, you spoke about judicial delays and so. In general, it's about the time it takes for many things. That's the more important thing.
Sure.
So even if there are multiple processes, if we have very set time limits and we stick to them, people will kind of over time get used to that.
Yeah.
So it is really the time it takes for many things to resolve.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Gupta had his hand up there, and then we get some from the audience. And the gentleman called Vivan at the... Vivan? Yeah, okay.
Hi, Anant. The question I had is that if we look at our last 5 or 7 year trend, our current account deficit has been continually narrowing. And obviously, we talk a lot about merchandise exports and the merchandise deficit. But services and invisibles, remittances, they're hugely compensating, and they've got to the stage where slightly higher growth rates relative to export growth rates on the merchandise front still compensate quite heavily for that. We've got to almost zero in the last couple of quarters. If this continues, which I hope it does, our services exports particularly, and we create a significant firepower from an investment perspective into the economy? And if we do, then is there thinking on how to use that effectively?
So the services sector growth and capital formation, because capital formation usually isn't that, requirement isn't that high for services sector compared to manufacturing. So if anything, we have to do more to incentivize manufacturing investment in the country, because services sector per se doesn't require the huge amounts of capital for them to continue to expand their output. So if I understood your question rightly, do we need to do more? Is that your question?
My point is that with a current account deficit narrowing and potentially turning into a positive, like it has been for China for many years, largely driven by merchandise exports, that gives the economy a significant amount of investable firepower, which can go into infrastructure, housing stock, various things, right? So, I mean, are we really adequately conscious of that? Are we recognizing this could happen, obviously protecting it to make sure it does happen, and then using that money well.
No, it's a fair point, but while the current account deficit has been stable in the last 5 years at somewhere between 0.7 to 1%, and maybe in the near term, given the questions that we have over the tariff and the export impact, if anything, it could be slightly widening in the course of next financial year, if these things don't get resolved quickly enough. But when you say that if the current account turns into a surplus, it simply means that domestic savings exceed domestic investments. It is a identity, and therefore, which means you have more investable resources in the economy itself. So it goes without saying that you can expand your capital formation. So it's kind of, it's true by definition. Yeah.
Felicitation, I'm going to put you on the spot. Yes, and then question the gentleman at the back there in the suit. He's been very keen. Do you have a mic, Felicitation?
Yeah.
Oh. Thank you, Anand, for always enriching discussion. One thing when we meet manufacturers, they generally complain about higher power cost and higher logistics cost vis-a-vis peers. To some extent, higher power cost are nothing but industry bearing agriculture subsidy. And to some extent, logistics, apart from the composition, which should have started from water and then go to road, we start from road and then go to water. But in railway also, the passenger fare have not been revised, and they kind of put burden on the industrial freight. Is there a way to manage agriculture power subsidy and passenger fare subsidy in the general budget so that our manufacturing can become competitive?
No, I think, again, as a member of the EAC PM, which you are, I'm sure this should be a very important topic of discussion in the next EAC PM meeting on how to address it. Because one is a state subject and one is a central subject on the agriculture. And I think it's not just the agriculture sector alone, it's also the household sector. Both of them have a huge power subsidy in comparison to industry, and in Vietnam it's the opposite. And your second point about transport, railway fares, and it also applies to state level, urban transportation models where tariff rates are not revised, etc. So it's about recovery of proper user charges from all stakeholders, the users, and that is a problem that cuts across union or state, etc. And I don't have a ready-made answer to your question, but the fact that you brought it up is important. I think between the EAC, PM and other bodies inside the government, we should continue to sort of look for economic pricing of the various user services. The point is well taken, Nilesh.
I have a specific rather than a generic question, sir. Earlier in the talk, we talked about QCOs, quality control orders. But we find in our industry, it's taking laboriously long. It's taking very long to go through with the process. It gets shunted from one ministry to the other, and now it has been going to be looked by the Department of Economic Affairs, whose committee has not even been constituted. So is there a way, sir, that we can expedite it? We have been able to prove that multiple exporters, about 3 times India's demand, are registered with BIS. So there's no problem in supplying the product to India. But is there a way that QCO remains, that can be implemented rather just being one of the non-regulatory or non-tariff support to Indian industry?
I didn't really catch the question. First of all, just to clarify on a point of fact, the DEA committee to look
DOE.
into QCOs has been constituted.
Okay.
It's already started functioning. It's already started responding to the internal QCO deliberations by pushing back or raising questions with ministries, etc. So the process is on. But I didn't really catch you the sort of the key part of your statement. What is it that you think should be done?
There are 2 points. So one is the long delay in having this done. This has been pending with various ministries for 1.5 years.
What is pending?
The approval of the QC order, to having the order passed in favor of the industry, which is being hurt by substandard product being coming to the country.
So you mean to say QCO should be implemented?
Should be implemented, yeah.
So I think that is an interesting take on the QCO situation, where you're saying QCO has to be implemented. I'm sure that will find very ready audience in the receptive ears in the ministry, I would think. Yeah.
Maybe we can have it offline to get more details.
Yeah.
Yes, please, gentlemen.
Sir, a few decades ago, corporate debt equity ratio weighted average was typically 2:1. Recently, that has trended towards approximately 1:1.
Yeah.
Also, we are seeing in India, in spite of the beginning of what we may term as a global commodity boom, we are seeing, relatively speaking, inflation to be a little benign also, which is good for India. And also foreign exchange reserves, they are excellent. We are near the lifetime peak of nearly $700 billion. So given that backdrop, where do we see on a qualitative basis the cost of capital for corporates? Given in economic parlance, when we talk about the impossible trinity, where we say that exchange rates, interest rates, and the capital flows cannot all be managed. So where do we see, qualitatively speaking, 5-10 years down the road, cost of capital? Because, sir, most of good, well-developed economies, large economies, historically have seen the decline in cost of capital.
Thank you. So first of all, the reason why the debt equity ratio of Indian corporate sector has come down is partly because of the massive accumulation of profits, and therefore there is enough internal resources to invest. And second, of course, there is a memory effect of the last 10 years of non-performing assets due to excess borrowing. That fades away only slowly. Not to mention the current prevailing uncertainties in the world, etc. So there are multiple reasons. Now, as far as the cost of capital is concerned, I do see it going down. That's what I mentioned earlier as well. We were borrowing at the government level at 9% 10 years ago. We are now borrowing at 6.5% rate for 10 years. And you are right that the inflation rate is coming down. So structurally, it will come down as we expand our supply side capacities, etc. So I do see that the borrowing cost for the Indian corporates will be lower, as it has been the case over the last 10 years. It is coming down. So I do see the trend continuing. If anything, it will become even more pronounced in the coming years.
Vivan get a question. I'm trying to get an under 30 also in the mix.
Behind you.
I think he's standing behind you there, Shomya. Do you think US will cut interest rates finally in the next 6-8 months? How long do you think it will take for them to do that?
The Federal Reserve interest rate.
Yeah.
You got the answer.
Go ahead.
Do you see the current proliferation of tariffs and protectionist measure globally as fragmenting the global economic order?
So whether or not it is about tariff and protectionist measures, the economic order would probably become more fragmented over the years. That is a kind of cyclical thing that happens over 30, 50 years at regular intervals. We probably have taken the last 35 years as a sort of a permanent feature. It is not the case. If you look back at history, it is a cyclical thing.
I think we have time for 2-3 more questions. Can I get a show of hands, please? Yeah, can we get the lady in the middle there, please? And then Kuldeep after that. The lady there.
Thank you. Very interesting discussion. I have to briefly introduce myself. I'm the Deputy Consul General of Finland here in Mumbai. Very nice to hear you quoted our president in the beginning. The EU and India are negotiating a free trade agreement at the moment, and it seems that there is a political will to actually get it done during this year. My question is, where do you see, from the Indian perspective, the potential of that agreement and possibly some threats of having an FTA with the EU?
No, I do understand that both sides are actually now keener than before to conclude this as soon as possible. From the Indian perspective, obviously, the European Union is a huge market, and therefore, it will open up a lot of opportunities for our exporters, both labor intensive in the services sector and in the manufacturing sector. But it's important that I understand from the European Union some of the issues pertaining to climate, gender, labor standards, etc., are very important. But some of these things are matters of sovereign decision-making, sovereign prerogatives, which have to be decided based on the economic context and the stage of development that the country is in. So I hope there is some sort of understanding of that would accelerate the progress of the conversation between the two countries.
Kuldeep?
Thank you, Anant. A very interesting, insightful discussion as always. Two questions actually. One is, Indian households are estimated to hold about $4 trillion of gold. So, Anant did speak about currency in circulation, but, there's a massive asset sitting, can we use it? Second, on cost of capital, specifically for bonds rated A and below, the cost is still double digits, and it's not come down last 15 years. If you good corporate for a special situation or for other corporates, so can the government do something for these corporates who want to grow fast, don't have capital market, equity market access, to really bring down the cost of debt to make them more competitive? Thank you.
I wouldn't be able to answer this question off the cuff, but we have to point taken. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Two more questions? Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, please. Mr.
Anand, absolute great honor here. Dilip Mehta here. We are all Indians hoping against the hope. Your prudent thinking, if the tariff is not revised from 50 to 25, what do you think, what would happen to Indian economy if 50% tariff stands? Thank you.
No, we did discuss that if it is not short-lived, as I said, there will be a growth impact which will spill over into the next year, which will be more significant. So there is no question that it will definitely significantly affect our exports to the US market. But again, it is 20% of our overall exports in merchandise goods, and maybe our just as the chairperson of the Gems and Jewelry Association said in an interview a couple of days ago, I'm sure over time this will also motivate many of them to find alternative markets, which will take time, and there are competition from other countries which are also trying to do the same thing. So yes, there will be a pronounced growth impact next year as well. But whether it will be only a negative impact and are there not silver linings, etc., I wouldn't say it's all doom and gloom, because by then you will have the full year of lower direct taxes, lower indirect taxes, and by then there would have been some lagged effects of the efforts to discovering new markets would have happened. The trade agreement with the European Union might have come into place by then. So there are compensating factors. So it will be very difficult to take the view that it's all only cloud and there is no silver lining. So I wouldn't do that.
The gentleman in the back there, yeah, please. I see this.
Hello. My name is Kushal Patel. We run India's largest digital asset investment advisory dealing in only blockchain assets. And I completely agree what was discussed in the rapid fire round. We don't see these assets replace currency, but more of an alternative investment. And more importantly, our industry is largely unregulated, as you know, and there's a global race for regulation. We had the Genius Act in the US. We are having a vote on the Clarity Act, which is a market structure bill in September. And globally, this is going through. And our industry body, which is the Bharat Web3 Association, used to not get a meeting for even once in 6 months, but that has changed, and now we are getting meetings with Niti Aayog and the relevant ministries on a weekly basis. There was supposed to be a regulation working paper come out back in May, then it was postponed to June, July, August, now September. We still haven't seen an industry paper for the stakeholders. I just want to know if something is going on that front, because there's so much unsolicited trading, leverage and all being used, and asset managers or unregulated asset managers like us want to come into the fore and help people out here. Thank you.
I don't have an answer to your question whether it is something is in the offing or not, and in what time frame, but I'll relay it to the right people.
The lady here, please, and a hand up for a while. And then we take last two questions, we'll close. We can keep them back to back so we can have one together.
Hi, Anand. I wanted to understand what is the government's thinking on the holdings in the PSUs? You know, how do we look at the PSU sector? That's one area where, you know, year after year, targets which have been set for disinvestment, whether strategic or otherwise, haven't been met. So is this an opportune time to really step on the gas as far as that sector is concerned? And, you know, what are we thinking on that? Thanks.
The mic there, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, myself Rahul Kothari. I understand strategic importance of shipbuilding, ship repair, including containers. On one side and on the other side, semiconductors were identified during COVID terms. How do you think about or understand about this sector where India can make a mark across the world, or are we thinking it more on the Aatma Nirbhar side?
So it's on the public sector units in the last 5 years, given how well they improved in terms of profitability and market cap performance, etc., we were able to realize revenues from the public sector, if not in the form of disinvestment, but in the form of dividends. So it didn't really matter how it came through. But certainly, yes, from the point of view of efficiencies and government maintaining a strategic stake in some sectors, some units, etc., that will remain the case. But I agree with you that in principle that we need to sort of move towards the kind of philosophy we enunciated back in 2020 in the first Atmanirbhar package, where we said we will maintain some stake in strategically important sectors and withdraw from other non-core sectors, etc. That is something that we need to move towards. And I do believe that I can see some stirring of action in this regard. I'm not entirely sure I'm competent to answer that question on the shipbuilding industry. What is the thinking about, you know, indigenization, or how do we view this? I need to defer to the experts in the Ministry of Shipbuilding. I don't have an answer to your question.
Okay, I think it was a great conversation. I'll just wrap up with a short kind of I had you hear about, I think it was in November, after Trump won the election, he was president-elect, and we had an Adda with Fareed Zakaria, where I asked him advice that he would give the Prime Minister, and his advice was, take a decision, make America your friend, be unambiguous about it, go all in on America. And I think it was a couple of weeks ago on his GPS show where he kind of remembered that interview and that sentence and said, I'm hard-pressed now to say that anymore because America has been so unpredictable and Trump has done so much damage to the relationship with India. It's not an easy sort of hand that the government has been dealt, and I just want to compliment you for being accessible. I know that, the unpredictability is not in our control, but you and the government have, I think, done a lot of outreach, have been doing a lot of meetings and doing everything that they can to at least hear and give the government side of what's next. So thank you for making time. Thank you always for all your lovely insight, and thank you to the audience. It's been a great audience and great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for the fabulous session. Please remain seated. May I request Raj Kamal Jha, Chief Editor, The Indian Express, to present a token of appreciation. I request everyone else to please remain seated. This illustration is by Swadeshi.
No, I have to say that since I have the sketch from 2022, I can compare how much I've aged in the last 3 years.
Thank you so much. May I now invite Mr. Saurabh Bhumik, Vice President, Radico Khaitan, to present a bouquet. Thank you. Please stay on stage. I would request our other partners to join for a group photograph. Bhoj Kumari from Jolie's, request you to please join in for the group photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Can you all come together for the picture? Thank you. And as we conclude, I would like to thank our partners, presenting partner Radhiko Khetan, associate partner Parul University, and experienced partner Jolie's. Please stay back and join us for some cocktails and snacks at the cannery.